Well, hello there. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different on this vlog. I'm going to actually do an introduction to the vlog. Normally I'm chatty through the whole vlog and talk all the time anyway, but since we're doing a distillery tour with tour guides, I'm going to let them do all of the talking. I'm just going to introduce it and let the tour guides take it from there. We were in Shelbyville, Tennessee, taking the distillery tour of Nearest Green Distilleries, better known to most Tennessee whiskey or bourbon drinkers as Uncle Nearest. On the tour we had 3 guides. The first guide gives us a little history. The second guide, Kevin, stays with us through the remainder of the tour, and we also go to a speakeasy that they have on property, and we get to learn about the women's suffrage movement, and Prohibition, because you can't talk about whiskey in the United States and not talk about Prohibition. Hope you enjoyed as much as we did. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and please comment if you've been on this. Let us know how you liked it. If you've been on any bourbon distillery tour, because I'm looking to do the whole trail. So if you've been on any, let us know how you like them. And I hope you enjoyed the vlog.
His son, Fawn Weaver, historian, caught this message. The man who taught young Jack Daniels how to distill whiskey was Nearest Green. The Weavers left LA, California, and traveled to a small town 25 miles from here. This is the home of Jack Daniels in Lynchburg, Tennessee. But they came to Lynchburg to find out about Nearest Green, who would work for, and where did it happen? So, 160 years ago, Mr. Dan Call, like you call someone, on this 313 acres. Mr. Call owned the farm, he owned the still, Nearest Green Still Farm, and he owned the store. Little Jack Daniels came to the Dan Call farm at the age of 6. Jack Daniels was the 10th child, and his parents had died in his earlier years. He was kind of hanging out with his siblings, but he realized become a man. So Dan Call accepted him. Everything's going fine, and all of a sudden, when he was 9, he kept questioning Dan Call. What's the wagons? What's the smell? What's the smoke? So Mr. Dan Call took him to Nearest and said, teach this boy how to distill whiskey because he's smart. Well, this is going real well.
The Welcome Center, all those artifacts from the Dan Call Farm. We're going to hear more about that today. But not just me, the Dan Call Farm was where Nearest Green lives and worked. This is the Sand Creek Farm. This used to be a working walking horse farm. I'll tell you all a little bit more about that on the opposite side of campus. But when we purchased the farm in 2016, we didn't have the heart to tear down any of the buildings. So with a few exceptions, all the structures you'll see today are original to the campus, including this concession stand. Now I see some of you already eyeing the menu, even though it's early in the morning. I don't blame you. In the spirit of transparency, we don't sell anything at this concession stand. It does serve 2 very important purposes, though. The first is to share the history of some of the most iconic snacks and brands that originated in the state of Tennessee that most people don't realize came from here. We're talking Little Debbie's, Goo Goo Clusters, Moon Pies. It was 2 brothers in the hills of Tennessee. They were making moonshine, and they were looking for somebody to take the edge off. For any of you that have had moonshine, you know it packs quite a punch, so anything to make it more enjoyable. And so they invented this lemon lime mixer that they nicknamed, hello, he's not part of the tour. They nicknamed after the nickname for moonshine Mountain Dew. So Mountain Dew originally came from Tennessee. It was also a dentist from here that invented cotton candy. He introduced it at the World's Fair, called it Fairy Floss. and a dentist selling cotton candy. We call that job security, all right? Playing at both ends.
The membership of women, whose thinking was that if they could eradicate alcohol, it would diminish the issues of domestic abuse and poverty. It took them 100 years, but in January 1920, mission accomplished. Prohibition passed. Saloon doors were slammed shut and legally locked. Now, we know that was temporary. They didn't know that. It only lasted a few years. But the mafia, man, boy, they saw an opening and they stepped right in. Before you could say Al Capone, they've opened up speakeasies and little hideaways everywhere, selling more alcohol than ever before. Paying no taxes on it either. Now, about the same time that all this was happening, women across the country were beginning to enjoy some newfound freedoms. They were cutting their hair. They were wearing shorter dresses. Not like today, but they were wearing shorter dresses. And some of them were probably dancing right along with the music, the fun, and the frolic in those speakeasies. They were having them all. They like the rose on his lapel indicated until it came to Representative Brown. Maybe that letter next to his heart stirred his conscience, because when they called his name, he had removed that red rose from his lapel and with his mother's letter clutched in his hand. With quiet commitment, he said, I, yes, for women to finally receive their civil right to vote. Can you imagine the chaos that prevailed in that Tennessee Assembly? If I close my eyes, I can hear those women shouting for joy. I can hear the angry rants of those men who opposed. That was such an act of courage by that young representative, because he was jeopardizing his political career. But what an act of love for his mama. His one vote was the deciding majority vote in that Tennessee Assembly that ratified that 19th Amendment across the country. And Tennessee became known as the perfect 36. That required 36th state that changed history for American women. Now, what does that have to do with this distillery? Thanks to the doors that were open and the paths that were paved for women, this distillery is headed by a leadership team composed solely of women. One of them is our master blender, the great-great-granddaughter of Mary Screen, Victoria Edie Butler. Another of whom is the mastermind, the mover and the shaker behind this entire enterprise, Fawn Weaver. As Sylvia told you out front, in 2016, Fawn was in Singapore with her husband, picked up in the New York Times. Read this article about this enslaved man in Tennessee who taught Jack Daniel the art of making whiskey. She was fascinated with that story. She wasn't in the whiskey business. She had never heard of Mary Screen. But right then and there, she told her husband, I'm going to Tennessee. I got to find out about this. I got to do some research. And research she did. 6 years after reading that article in Singapore, thanks to opportunity and her dogged determination, Fawn hosted the grand opening of this Mary Screen Distillery here in Shelbyville, Tennessee. And today, 2 years last month, since that grand opening, and bear in mind we're only open 4 days a week, and up until recently just 2 days a week. But in 2 years' time, this distillery has hosted more than 100,000 guests. I think that's pretty awesome.
Memphis.
All right, fantastic. You been here before?
No.
All right. Came all this way just to see me. All right. I needed that. So as I mentioned on the outside from the concession, this is the Sand Creek Farm. This is the home of the Tennessee Walking Horse. Shelbyville is the home of the Tennessee Walking Horse. Now, I did not know what that was, what the Tennessee Walking Horse was, before I started working here. But back in the day, workhorses, farm horses, they had a really irregular. If any of you have seen those competitions and the horses walking very trim, very proper, that's a Tennessee Walking Horse. Now, this farm belonged to Billy Gray. He was a world-famous horse trainer. This was his house when he lived on the farm. The farm did fall into disrepair in 2016, and that's when our owners purchased it. We didn't have the heart to tear anything down, so this house is now the office of our Chief Business Officer, Keith Weaver. Now, in addition to being our Chief Business Officer, he's also an executive. For instance, so like in August and September, Shelbyville is completely consumed with horse enthusiasts, and so there'll be walking competitions. So we have about under 50 here on campus. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of plans for our campus. You're going to hear me say the word plans a lot because plans change. So if we don't have a water slide next summer, we're working on it. The press has called us Malt Disney. And we really do want to lean into that moniker. So part of our plans here are to include a hotel, housing accommodations, glamping, things for the kids to do to really lean into that malt Disney and give you all a destination spot. Now, the first step in that process is the Humble Baron, the restaurant behind me. Now, if it wasn't enough to name an entire bar and restaurant after Keith, the Humble Baron does have the world's longest bar. We just won the record. For those of you from Ohio, you may have been to Put-in-Bay. They used to have the record at 427. They are none too pleased with us at the moment. I've heard that they might be extending their bar. Ours also extends, so we could have a new War of the Roses on our hands. We'll see. But in addition to the world's longest bar itself, for those of you from the Atlanta area or familiar with Top Chef and HGTV, Chef G. Garvin from Atlanta set up our restaurant inside of there, so you cannot go wrong with the menu. When we get back to the Welcome Center, hang a hard left, and you can go right to the bar. You'll also notice that we have a stage for live performance. We have live music every weekend, and we do want to make this a destination spot for artists from all around the world that generally wouldn't come to this part of the country. And then this craft store here opens up, and we have plans for a 15,000 seat amphitheater that'll eventually be built out here so we can do festivals and things when the weather's not so this. Any questions about Humble Baron? Inside the horseshoe logo, if you see the Dan Call Farm logo on any of our bottles, hold on to that. It's a collector's item. You're welcome to withhold that information from your friends and fleece them. I'm not gonna judge. Do with that what you will. But now all of our whiskey is 100% our juice, our recipe, our process. So if you see that logo, that is 100% ours. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with how you make whiskey, I was not before starting here. But what you do to make whiskey, you take barley, wheat, rye, and corn, and you mill those grains between two millstones, like the one that was in the Welcome Center. And when you grind up these grains, you're releasing the sugar that's inside. So you take these ground grains, put them in a vat of water, and start heating that up, and then you add yeast. That yeast is going to be eating the sugar, and that's going to create the alcohol that you're looking for. This material has a paste-like consistency and some liquid. It's called a distiller's beer. You take that and you put it in the base of a copper still. This right here in the window is a 30-foot copper still, 18 inches in diameter. She'll make anywhere around 4,000 barrels a year, which is roughly 8 million bottles. But you take that distiller's beer, put it in the base of a still, you heat it up. That's going to evaporate the liquid at the bottom. It goes up to the very top and recollects, and then we collect that liquid. Now, if we were to drink that, the tour would end right here because that's just straight moonshine, and the path is way too curvy. But if you were to take that moonshine, put it in a barrel and age it, you'd have yourself a bourbon. But if you took that moonshine, filtered it through sugar maple charcoal, and then you aged it in a barrel, you'd have a Tennessee whiskey. And there's a few other stipulations that define a Tennessee whiskey that I'll get into during the tasting. But if you take nothing else away from this tour, the difference between a Tennessee whiskey and a bourbon is a Tennessee whiskey is a bourbon +1. That's charcoal. So when you hear Tennessee whiskey, think charcoal. If you've ever had charcoal mellowed whiskey, you'll notice it's a lot smoother. And what the charcoal does is it pulls out fatty acids, corn oils, any impurities, things that are going to give you a headache tomorrow. So that's why you generally find charcoal mellowed whiskey to be so much smoother. Now here we have a vat that's about 10 feet deep, 6 feet wide, with pieces of charcoal the size of your fingernail. And we take that moonshine that we collect from the still, and we drip it 1 drop at a time through that charcoal. We don't let 2 drops touch one another. It takes about 7 to 10 days for 1 drop to reach the bottom, and then that goes into the barrel. So 1884 is the year that Nearest retired, and he filled his last barrel. Now we have documentation that he made his whiskey between 92 and 95 proof. We split the difference here at 93 proof. This is a small batch whiskey made with 90 barrels. I'm going to squeeze that out of you. And I find it to be pretty accessible, pretty approachable. I did not drink my whiskey neat before I found this, but neat, a little bit of water, a little bit of ice, I find it to be really approachable. I also recommend leaving a little bit in the cup to come back to at the very end, just so you can see how much more it's opened up. So, all right, let's go ahead. We're diving on in. Let's take a sip of the 1884. No coffee, no cursing, no
That's good. Nice and smooth. Come on, Benji.
She said, I don't try.
Y'all still here?
Let me see your reaction.
All right, so we're going to be doing that sip and spit between each stage. You're welcome to sniff your neighbor's hand. It'll be a different experience.
I think it's really good.
But we set it in between each whiskey.
I'm gonna turn her into a whiskey drinker yet.
Think about that charcoal that I mentioned earlier. That's really the defining quality. You take nothing else away, Lincoln County process means charcoal. Now, it'd be like using a tea bag again. It would count as artificial flavoring. So single-use white oak American barrel has to go into the barrel no more than 125 proof, cannot come out any less than 80 proof, and it must be filtered through sugar maple charcoal. You skip any of the steps, you got yourself a really nice bourbon, but you don't have a whiskey. We could head back to Texas, do the exact same process, set up a still, same recipe, really good bourbon, not a Tennessee whiskey. Now, of expressions that are available everywhere, this one is our most popular. This is also our utility knife. Similar mash bill to the 84, different proportions, neat, a little bit of water, ice, you can mix with this, you can experiment with this. Also, if there's any bakers in the group, you can soak your pecans in this for pecan pies, anything with butter, anything with vanilla, you can integrate it into that as well. This comes in at 100 proof, but people do find it generally to be smoother than the 84. But go ahead and give this one a try.
It's not bad.
That's next to it.
A whole lot smoother.
Yeah. I like that one.
I've had it at the house. When our tour mates told Deja to get off the tequila.
All right, y'all. So go ahead, get yourself that sip. And that one's coming in at an easy 121.1.
You like that one? But do you get the notes? Can you pick everything out?
It's like vanilla, butterscotch.
The new appreciation for life.
What did he say? 121 proof? Yeah, you can feel it. You can feel it, but it's good. I will be bringing a bottle of this one home.
So let's go ahead and reset, get that sip of water, get that sniff. We're going to be moving on to the next one over, the barrel. Now, a barrel will give you maybe max 260 bottles, assuming no loss, assuming you're not proofing it down. So if we only get 50 bottles from one barrel, that's all we're getting. So how this whiskey comes to be, it's a truly one-of-a-kind whiskey. When Miss Victoria is tasting barrels of the 84 that she's intending to use for the master blend, every now and again she comes across one that she really likes. And all she does is set it aside and lets it age for an additional 2 years. Now, you may notice of the whiskeys you've got in front of you, this one has the richest, darkest color. The other four are aged 4.5 years. This is aged for 6 years. Now, when the whiskey goes into that barrel, it's going in clear. It's that moonshine, and it's actually the wood itself that's been charred that's giving you the color and the flavor. In the hot summer months, that whiskey presses out into the wood. In the cold months, it comes back in. And that in and out porosity is giving you all this color and character. Culture is not a word. But because such a limited amount of this is being made, I'll be honest, I didn't really fully appreciate what the deal with whiskey was. I was younger, I was in my 20s, I didn't know any better. But when it comes to these more exclusive expressions, when you're sharing it with people, who you choose to share your whiskey with, you're choosing to share a memory, sharing a moment with that person. So I don't know if all of you already knew each other before you came on this tour, that'd be pretty nuts. But if you were all to come back a year from now, wearing the exact same thing, I was your tour guide, we would not be able to recreate this part of the tour. This whiskey would be gone.
Absolutely.
So all of you coming here on your own individual walks of life to be here to try this have come to create an individual moment. This is my favorite of the exclusive expressions. You're going to get some very clear notes of caramel. And although it's the same recipe as the 84 and the master blend, it's a completely different flavor profile. So welcome, welcome. Go ahead and try it.
All right, this is the Uncle Nearest single barrel. We're going to get David's thoughts and opinions.
So that little right there where conversation builds until we get to the single barrel, and then people really start thinking about their lives.
There's some uncooked Singleberry for you.
You can taste the hint of caramel in it.
So if everyone's had a chance to try the single barrel black label, we're going to reset one more time. Sip of water, sip of the hand.
Singleberry is very good. Very, very good. Oh my goodness, it smells good in there.
Process, you didn't have AC, we don't have AC on our whiskey. Now, for those of you that have been to the Jack Daniel's distillery, for instance, you've seen those 6-story brick houses. That 6-story, you're gonna get a really big temperature difference. In here, it's about 10 degrees at any given point in terms of difference. Now, we do not rotate the position of the barrels in the house. When they place them, we leave them where they are. We let Mother Nature go to work. Right now, all these barrels, we have about a 2,000 barrel capacity, roughly around 1,900. But these are being aged for our 1820 blend. That's our 11-year aged whiskey. These are in about year 2 or 3, so if y'all come back in a short 9 years, we'll have some of our 1820 blend available for you. But less than 1% of our whiskey ever gets considered for our 1820 blend, and only the best of the best will actually get bottled. Now, when y'all walked in, I'm sure you guys noticed a few things immediately besides the heat. First would have been that sweet aroma that's in the air. That's what we call the angel share. It's the actual vapor of the whiskey itself working its way through the wood. And we send them to the angels as a tip for looking out for us. And then I'm sure that you noticed that it appears that some of these barrels are leaking. And they are. And this is perfectly normal. Very rarely do we actually have to tend to a leak in the barrel house. This is what is known as distiller's candy. It's as close to free samples as we get at nearest grain. But this is the whiskey itself working its way through the wood, and then it will dry and seal itself like a hard candy. Now, these are all white oak American barrels that we get from a cooperage in Kentucky. Cooper is the person that makes the barrel, and they're comprised of these copper rings and these staves. Now, no nails, no glue go into holding the barrel in the store. Do you want it to be a movie? Do you want it to be a book? Do you want it to be a distillery? And what they asked was that their name go on the bottle. But Fawn is also arranged so that every descendant of nearest grain, as long as they maintain a 3.0 GPA, all of their higher education is paid for up to their PhD. So we really want to honor those, obviously, that have come before us. So yeah, this was a farmland, so we got about 400 acres here. So eventually, we'll have the hotel, we'll have the cornfields, we'll have everything here on site.
After the tour, we went to the Humble Baron restaurant, which houses the world's longest bar, where we had a few cocktails before our meal. Our bartender is making Robert's cocktail, which is called Moonwalking and Calabasas, which has Buccaneers 1856, a Vernon, a Marrow, rhubarb, lemon, and egg white. The drink was absolutely delicious. It was Sunday brunch and our food has arrived. We had the Nashville hot shrimp and grits, maple bacon, catfish and grits, truffle fries, and smoked wings. The food was absolutely amazing.
Besides the humble dairy housing the world's longest bar, it also has a stage for live music and entertainment. During Sunday brunch, we were entertained with good Southern gospel. So, if you're seeing this again, that means you watched the whole video. Cheers. I appreciate that. So, did you like it? Would you take it? We enjoyed it. And Sandra and Deja don't drink whiskey like that, but they have told me that they want to take it again. So, of course, some places I couldn't take you because, you know, you can't photo or video in some spots. And I didn't give you everything because I do want you to go and take it. And I don't want to ruin it for you. I just want to give you a touch of what's going on. I will say that we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. It was a very good tour. The restaurant, we ate at the Humble Baron with the world's longest bar that you will see in the video, and we enjoyed that as well. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and definitely share. And I'll put some information to nearest distilleries in the description below. See you next time. Cheers.